Hello and welcome to today's Escher webinar. My name is Alicia and I'm joined by my colleague Brian. And today we'll show you highlights of the Genesis R&D 11.11 update, which was recently released. I'll tell you a bit about the features and options addressed, and Brian will demonstrate these in the software. Before we get into the main topic, let me give you a little background on Escher research. Escher was established in 1981 and has grown from offering one of the first nutrition and labeling software solutions to a full suite of products and services, including the Genesis R&D Foods software that we'll be showing today, Genesis R&D Supplements, the food processor software that's used for dietary analysis, as well as our consulting services. They provide labeling services, formula review, and their expertise for customized projects. Genesis R&D Foods was introduced in 1991 to help address the need for convenient formula analysis and formatting of NLEA food labels for U.S. regulations. Over the years, Genesis has remained the go-to standard for product development, recipe analysis, and nutrition facts creation, as well as restaurant menu analysis and reporting. We offer label modules to prepare compliant labels for the U.S., Canada, the EU, and for Mexico. And if you have any questions about the version that you're running, your license, or your account, please contact the Escher sales team at sales@escher.com. Today's webinar wraps up this year's topics, but look for more on the schedule soon. You can find recordings of our previous webinars on the Escher website in the Events tab. And just a reminder that earlier in the year, we presented a couple webinars discussing allergens, one specifically on the FASTER Act, and another generally speaking on working with allergens in Genesis. In addition to those, we have the Genesis 101 series. These are especially helpful if you need a refresher on the basic uses of Genesis, or if you have new personnel on staff that need an organized introduction to the software. Be sure to check those out. As always, this webinar is being recorded, and you'll receive a link to the recording as well as the slide deck following the webinar. Please note that if you have any questions, send those in right away via the GoToWebinar control panel. Don't wait until the end. We do have colleagues standing by to help respond to your questions. If we don't happen to get back to you during the webinar, or if your question needs a little bit more research or might be a bit more technical in nature, we'll follow up with you directly. And today, we'll be discussing the feature enhancements included in Genesis version 11.11, including Sesame added as a U.S. allergen. We'll show you the changes made to the U.S. and Canadian nutrient content claims features, updates made to the menu label options, and we'll end with the Q&A. So I want to just remind you of some of the update options. For cloud subscribers, the software is maintained and updated automatically. So for current cloud subscriptions, you'll see version 11.11 already. For desktop installations, update notification has been sent to the primary contact on your account. You may need to check with your IT staff regarding the availability of the update if it hasn't already been installed for you. In Genesis, if you need to check the version you're running, go to the About button that's on the main screen in the software, and that will show you the version that you have installed as well as some other license information. And again, if you have any questions about your account or the version that you're running, contact the Escher sales team. We talked about the FASTER Act earlier in the year, and we have a webinar that provides more detail on the regulatory aspects. But in short, sesame is now one of the 9 major allergens that shall be declared on U.S. food packages when present in the food. The sesame seeds allergen has existed in Genesis for some time, but previously it wasn't connected with the U.S. allergen set. So with Genesis 11.11, the allergen name now shows as Sesame/sesame seeds, and it's included in working with the U.S. allergens. In the U.S., the term sesame is used while in other countries like Canada, the term sesame seeds is used to convey the sesame allergen. So when you're working in Genesis, the appropriate term for the allergen will appear based on the country or authority that you have selected within the label settings. And I want to remind you that you need to review the allergens for your ingredients and your recipes. If you've already reviewed sesame seeds, the sesame seeds allergen indicator, then that indication that you've selected, if you have it checked or not checked, and you've already reviewed that, the selection that you have will hold true. However, because sesame is newly associated with U.S. allergens, if you don't already or haven't already reviewed ingredients for the sesame allergen, say you were only working with the U.S. set of allergens that didn't show sesame before, and you haven't cleared the sesame seeds allergen for items that don't contain sesame, then you can expect to see sesame appear for some items. You can edit the allergens in your ingredient records and recipes. And again, like I mentioned, we have an allergen webinar from earlier in the year, so that discusses more general approaches for working with the allergen features in Genesis. Genesis 11.11 also offers some updating of the nutrient content claims for both the US and Canada. For the US set, you'll see some display revisions to hopefully improve the clarity of information presented when working with the claims. Here you can see the screenshot of the U.S. nutrient content claims features. The reference amount column was previously referred to as nutrient amount, so that's been renamed. This column shows the amount of each nutrient for which possible claims are being compared. You'll also see footnotes at the bottom of the screen. So you'll see claims based on line that informs you of the country or authority that you have selected. You'll see reminders that Genesis provides an initial assessment, but you do want to be aware of the specific allowances in the CFR when making claims on products. For instance, meals and main dishes require special consideration, so claims indicated on the screen may not apply to meals and main dishes. You want to refer to the noted CFR section for those types of products. The abbreviation for RAC is defined here. And when selected, claims appear on the View Label screen and report. So there's just a reminder of those types of items. With U.S. claims regulations, if a nutrient content claim is made, but certain nutrients surpass determined thresholds, then a disclosure statement must be included with the nutrient content claim or claims. And the nutrient thresholds are fat at 13 grams, saturated fat at 4 grams, cholesterol 60 milligrams, and sodium at 480 milligrams. This is intended to help consumers sift through statements on packages. For instance, if a food includes a claim of high in fiber, but the sodium content is greater than 480 milligrams, the consumer needs to weigh the benefits versus possible concerns of consuming the food. So it just helps keep consumers informed. If the reference amount of the food qualifies for claims and you choose to make a claim and the food contains a greater amount of any of these thresholds, then the disclosure statement will appear in addition to the nutrient content claims that you select. The disclosure statement reports the nutrient or the nutrients that exceed the thresholds. So you can see here in my example, I have a high fiber and excellent source of iron claims appearing, but the disclosure statement shows fat, cholesterol, and sodium, but not saturated fat based on the composition of the food that I used for these claims. The Canadian claims page was also updated to provide more clarity. Prior, only the reference amount column showed on the Canadian nutrient content screen. We've added the per serving column to show both values on which the claims are compared. So with Canadian nutrient content claims, the claim must be true for both the reference amount as well as the serving size. So the two columns provide you with more detail to support the qualifying claims. And comparative nutrient content claims are those that compare the nutritional properties of two or more foods. Examples of such claims include phrases like reduced or lower, more, light in terms of energy or fat, When making a comparative claim between two similar foods, a reference recipe is used. The reference recipe is the standard version of the food, which gives the baseline on which comparative claims can be made. For example, a reduced sodium recipe is compared to a reference recipe with the usual amount of sodium content. The reduced sodium recipe would need to show that it contains a significantly lesser amount of sodium than the reference recipe. And in Genesis, when working with comparative claims, you'll see 3 columns now in the nutrient content claims screen. This shows the reference amount, the per serving amount, and the reference amount for the reference recipe. For comparative claims, the reference amount of your adjusted recipe is compared to the reference amount of the reference recipe. Canadian nutrition facts tables use periods or commas depending on the language that is selected. Genesis applies these automatically based on your label selections. So if the label is presented in English only, the label shows periods for decimals. If the label is presented in French only, it shows commas. If a bilingual label is used, then as directed by the Canadian regulations, Genesis looks to the language order selected and uses the primary language to determine the punctuation style. So now we'll switch over to talking about menu label features. The menu label options in Genesis provide a way to create menus from recipes and ingredients and to list a variety of information suitable for fulfilling the FDA menu labeling requirements. For this feature set, Genesis 11.11 includes some on-screen revisions to help navigate display options better. So I'll show you a closer look at the menu label report and speak to the nutrient selection options next. But just a note on the nutrients used for the menu label report. By default, the menu label nutrient set displayed is the 1990 Nutrition Facts set. The menu labeling regulations were finalized just prior to the FDA's update of the 2016 Nutrition and Supplement Facts labeling requirements, so the older the 1990 nutrient set is referred to in the menu labeling regulations. The FDA, however, directed that you can use either the 1990 or the 2016 nutrient set to fulfill the menu labeling requirements. So that's why we have a couple different displays and options here with the nutrient sets. The menu label report can display a lot of information, and one of the updates with this report is the relocation of the columns selection. Prior, available columns were listed in the upper right-hand corner of this screen. To keep the space a little tidier, you'll now see in blue text the additional columns text, and you could click on that. When clicking on the additional columns, you'll see a drop-down list and check the columns you wish to include on the screen in the report. So from the list shown, you can check things or choose to display items like user code, gram weight, ingredient statement, allergens, etc. And as I mentioned, for this report, the default set of the menu label nutrients is the 1990 labeling set. So if you wish to see a different set of nutrients, you'll uncheck the label nutrients only indicator. And doing so will then display the set of nutrients that you have selected in your nutrients to view. So again, in Genesis, the nutrients to view option is where you choose which nutrients you want to see on screen and on many of the reports. So you can switch the nutrients to view at any time and make sure, make this easier, and in making this easier to work within the menu label settings right here, we've included the nutrients to view button right here on the screen. So you can just click on nutrients to view button and then select a different set of nutrients. For instance, the U.S. Restaurant Manual 2016, as you can see that I have indicated here in this example. And lastly, Genesis 11.11 provides a relocation of some of the export options. So this is showing the recipe view, and the export button with the drop-down menu was removed. The individual export options were moved to the end of the menu bar. So you'll now see individual buttons for exporting. And these include the recipe analysis, a recipe file in its EXL file format, which is the Escher file format, the recipe as an ingredient, exporting the label report, and recipe sections that you can select from a list. So note that in this example, the label report is grayed out. This export option will show as available when you open the View Label screen, and then you can export that View Label as a report. And with the recipe sections, when you click on this button, you'll see a list of the sections of reports that you can choose to include when exporting the recipe. So at this time, let me turn it over to Brian, and he'll show you these changes in the software.
Okay, so what I have here is a test sauce. It would just be something for use in pasta or other things. And really, I'm going to show you some of the things that Alicia just went over. So to start with, we'll go look at the allergen. I do have sesame seeds in here, so you can show that it's showing up in my contain statement here. And because it's the US, it's just showing up as sesame. If I go in here now to look at the claim side of things, you can see if I increase my bacon to change the nutritional on the label, I'm just going to do this to show you the warning statement. So now you can see that I've overreached the level for sodium content. So it's bringing in the statement for me as well here. If I put it back, my sodium level's gone down and now that's disappeared. And just looking at the claims box, you can also see that this has changed slightly. So we have the recipe amount, or the reference amount, and the reference recipe right here. And again, it's showing me the items I can use. You also have some statements down here as well, talking about the rack and the guidance from CFRs. Click OK. If I look at the Canadian version of this and switch over, you're going to see that now the allergen has changed to sesame seeds. And obviously that's one of the changes to the regulations. They're stated differently by country. Next thing I want to do is look at the reference amount. So if I'm looking at claims that are lower or comparative to two items, I'll go into edit recipe, look at my nutrient content claims. I'm going to select an item here, and this is the one I want to use. Click OK. And then if I go to my claims page here, you can see that this is my reference recipe, and this is, this is the amount of my current recipe, and this is the reference recipe I'm using here. So you can see in things here, I am actually lower in saturated fatty acids, lower in trans fatty acids, and I can use the term light because I'm comparing the two items against each other. Last thing I want to show you on this page is the export area here. You can see these are the tabs you would use. So if I wanted to export a recipe file, I would just click on that. This is more user interface change. It just makes it a little bit more readily available and easier to use. Okay, final thing we want to look at is the menu label and the changes to the menu label. So if I come here, I'm going to open up a menu label here. And I have one set up already. So these are just a bunch of items that I put together to show you the menu label. I'll click on that. And you can see here, I've got my different items. Now, I can choose to show, right now I have it set to US 2016. I can unclick this and change nutrients to pick that, or I can do the standard default label. I'm going to come back here. If I go to additional columns, this is where I'm going to choose what I want to see on there. So I can, in addition to this information, I'm going to add gram weights and Rather than do allergen statement, I'm going to break out the allergens. If I click OK, now this has changed the report. So you can see I've got my broken out allergens in here versus just the statement by itself. So this is really where you're going to customize your report, put the things that matter to you, change the format. You may want to just have an overall allergen statement versus broken out allergens, or with your ingredient statement, how you want to place that. So there's a lot of different changes you can do this with the new system. Okay, those are the majority of the changes to the system. So I'm going to turn this back to Alicia.
All right, thanks, Brian. In addition to the webinars that we present here, we also offer formal instruction on the software, and Genesis R&D training classes dive much deeper into working with the software features and discussions on regulations and specific scenarios. We do offer 2-day professional and 1-day advanced level courses, or we combine these into a 3-day class option. The typical training covers the fundamentals of using Genesis R&D as well as typically FDA label creation and regulations. The advanced day builds upon the features and topics covered in the professional class, and that can be attended as a single-day option if you've already attended the professional level course. The last training for this year is the end of the month, so November 30th through December 2nd, and that is an online class. The 2022 schedule will be posted soon with the dates and online and in-person class schedule, so look for that soon. You can find registration information and other details on the Escher website. And if you have any questions about the classes, or if your organization needs to schedule a group training for your specific needs, please get in touch with the training team at training@escher.com. And as always, you can stay in touch with Escher in a variety of ways. If you need to get in touch with our sales, support, or consulting teams, you can reach out to us by phone, email, or the links here. We also always invite you to join in the Escher LinkedIn community, and you can find additional resources and subscribe to our blog and newsletter on the Escher website. So at this time, I'll turn it back to Brian for some questions.
Yeah, the first question is, what is the compliance date for declaring sesame as an allergen?
Great question, yes. So the compliance date, or the date that sesame as an allergen must be declared on U.S. food packages, is January 1st, 2023. However, you can begin declaring sesame within the contains or the allergen statement now. You don't have to wait until 2023. This is why you're seeing the sesame allergen changes in Genesis version 11.11. And also, we've seen FDA issuing warning letters regarding ingredient statements, lack of common and usual language for sesame ingredients. So it's definitely on FDA's radar. We want to remind you that you want to make sure and review sesame, make sure that's a part of your U.S. allergen processes going forward. Review your recipes and ingredients in Genesis and immediately begin working towards compliance.
The next question is, we added sesame as a custom allergen in our Genesis. How do we remove that now and instead use the U.S. sesame allergen?
Right. So earlier in the year, as the FASTER Act was kind of taking shape and we had a few different options to work with, you may have created sesame as a new allergen, a user-added allergen in your software. If that's the case, get in touch with tech support. They do have some scripts that can help you translate or convert your sesame, your added sesame allergen, to the U.S. sesame allergen so that it's treated properly within the U.S. labeling features. And you can reach tech support at support@escher.com.
And finally, is there an easy way to remove sesame as an allergen from all of our recipes and ingredients, then manually add them back in as needed?
You can do that. Again, you may want to reach out to tech support if you need assistance on kind of a batch approach to clearing out an allergen or handling it in that way. So you can certainly manually adjust individual ingredients or your recipes, but if you need to work in a kind of a batch type approach, get in touch with tech support and they can assist.
Okay. Well, thank you for attending the Genesis webinar today. We will be answering questions as they come in, so if you have any additional questions that weren't answered, please send them to us. We'd be happy to get back to you. But that will conclude our webinar. Thank you.